One of the biggest problems we see is a dynasty roster that has all the value in the world, all of the good players, but doesn't win a championship. And a lot of people come to asking, why is my team not winning a championship? This video is going to tell you why there are disconnects sometimes between having a good dynasty roster and having a championship dynasty roster, and how to build the perfect dynasty roster, one that holds and maintains values, and one that scores enough points to win you championships and win you money, because money is cool. Drop a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe. We're still here as national champions in the Florida Keys, celebrating. And yeah, we're national champions. It's a pretty surreal feeling, and so we're here celebrating. But yeah, again, the problem is that we see all these people with really valuable rosters that don't actually win championships. Why does that happen? We're going to talk about that. You know, not knowing who to start on a week-to-week basis, having no clue what to do with your rookie picks. Let's talk about how to build the perfect dynasty roster. First of all, I want to introduce to you production versus value share. We talk about production and value being really the two main things that you have to balance in dynasty fantasy football, right? In fantasy football, regular redraft fantasy football, it's all production. It's just about how many points you actually score. But in dynasty, you have to consider value, and baked into value are things like age, insulation, situation, things like that. You have to balance these two things to create a perfect dynasty roster. And so we talked about it for all of these years, but what we did was create an actual metric for your team that shows you how productive your team is versus how valuable your team is. And we use this to evaluate your teams when we are reviewing them ourselves. And so I want to kind of explain how that works and then tell you what you should be targeting on your team. First of all, let's talk about your value share. Again, this is the percentage of value that you own relative to all of the value in your league, okay? Value share should be anywhere from 2 to 3% above expected. What are expected value share rates in leagues? Well, it depends on how many teams are in your leagues, right? A 10-team league is going to have an expected 10% value share, because if you take 100% of the value and divide it by 10, each team should have about 10% of the value. In a 12-team, that's going to be about 8.3 or 8.5% that you would expect a team to have. And so when we're looking at value share for your teams, how valuable is the best dynasty, or a dynasty team that is like set up to win a championship that we know is going to be potentially successful? Again, we're looking for 2 to 3% higher than what the expected is. So again, for a 10-team league, that'd be about 12 to 13% value share, meaning this, of all of the value in your league, value calculated, we do that on our own back end, things like that. We have our own formulas, our own algorithms. We have a lot of data scientists working for us and helping us out with that. A lot of very smart people. We typically expect that to be about 12 to 13%. And in our 12-team leagues, what we see, again, is 10.5 to 12.5% or more for our very good teams, our standard value to enhanced value that we think are going to contend. So again, your value share should be anywhere from 2 to 3% higher than what we'd expect if the league had been drafted out and it was exactly even. And then the production share.
Yeah, so with production share, it's a little less of like an exact science, but generally what we look at is we want to see your production share within striking distance of your value share. If you are a really solid team that's looking to go on a championship run, your top 3 to 4 in value share in your league, you're going to want to probably be at the very least top 6, probably top 4 to 5. You want to be right around where your value share is. We've got an example roster here for you. We do so many of these blueprints all the time, and we just wanted to give you some like practical examples of this. But with the JJ1215 team here, this is a really good example of like the balance between production and value share. When you look at his value share, number 1 in his league, right? This is an enhanced value team. Not every team is going to look like this, but the production share actually is 9th in his league. So even though he's enhanced value and well-rounded, some of the moves that we're having him make, not some of them, all of the moves that we have him make on this team are to get that production share up to a point where it actually is going to pay dividends for him to have the best value in the league. Because ultimately, what's the goal of having all that value on your roster? It's to score points so that you can win your leagues and win money. And yeah, this is January. Yeah, this is the off season where, again, your starting lineup, we're not going to make a stink about your starting lineup so much as we are going to make a stink about your upside opportunity on a roster type like this. So keep that in mind. Again, if you have a team that is just, what is this, a 12-team league? Or this is a 10-team league, so yes, still 15.3% value share. That's 50% over expected for your average team in a 10-team league. Like it's time to play Big Boy Dynasty, and it's time to turn this into that same amount of production essentially and be one of the most productive teams in your league and get to a championship. So JJ1215 going to be a good example of that. Big production and value share gaps just lead to sexy teams and win absolutely nothing. So make sure that we've seen plenty of elite value teams as well that are like, again, you have upwards of 18% of the value share in your league. Even in 12 teams, we've seen that before. and it's like, have you won your league yet? No, we haven't won our league yet. Okay, well, it's time to fix that. So that's the big important case with production share here. Again, less of like hey, we're looking exactly at this percentage here that we want you to have production value or production share wise. It's more just, hey, let's make sure that it's actually in line with your value.
Yeah, use your value to win, to get production on your team, because production wins championships. That's kind of the most important point there. Make sure there's not a big imbalance there. And a good example of a blueprint here real quick from Beastlust, that was kind of a good balance of this that I saw. I picked out some blueprints that I really liked the teams on. Not crazy teams. This is a standard value team, so it's a team that any of you could have on your Dynasty rosters. Not an enhanced value, not an elite value, but 10% value share was second in his league, and his production share was 11%, which is first in his league. Perfect. We've got 2 to 3% higher in both metrics. They're both very close. A lot of times this is flipped and we see like an 11% value share and 10% production share. Again, the point is make sure you don't have all the value and no production and vice versa, because any imbalance in these two things is going to lead to an unhealthy Dynasty roster. Now, another thing that we need to talk about as we get into this is the value proportion across positions, because a lot of people ask us, how many wide receivers should I own? How many running backs should I own? How many elite quarterbacks should I own? Or should I own any? Should I have an elite tight end on my team? What's the correct answer to this? And I looked at a sample of about 10 to 12 of some of the better teams that we've reviewed recently. A combination of standard value teams, enhanced value teams, and elite value teams. Although I don't think I pulled any elite value teams in this, I wanted to try to be as relatable to every team that we're talking about here as possible. And so I was looking at, okay, what was the roster makeup of these rosters that I was actually pulling? And there was a pretty common trend between all of these rosters that we graded highly and that we thought were in the best spot to win a championship. At minimum, on every single one of these rosters, 33% of your roster value should be at the wide receiver position. On most rosters, it's about 40 to 50%. You'll notice on the value proportion graphs, we'll put a couple on the screen right now, that most of these wide receiver rooms are making up anywhere from 40 to 55% of their overall production. Wide receiver can make up anywhere from a third to half of your overall team value. And that's going to be the sweet spot. Again, a lot of the teams that we see with imbalances, which I'm going to show a couple here, they don't win at as much of a higher rate, and I think there's a direct correlation between how much value you have at the wide receiver position and the running back position and how much value you have at your quarterback and tight end position. About 20 to 35% of your roster value should be at the running back position. So again, about half of the wide receiver position, but still the second biggest group. Your priority should go like this. The most of your value should be in wide receiver, and then running back, and then quarterback and tight end. You can flip back whichever one, and then, of course, your picks, if you're competing, should not be high either. But again, to kind of sum this up in terms of what we're actually prioritizing, in this day and age in Dynasty Fantasy Football, it is most important to value wide receiver and running back and dominate those positions as opposed to dominating at the quarterback and tight end position. Wide receiver and running back should make up about 70% of your total overall roster value, not including draft picks, and quarterback and tight end should make up about 30%. So it should be about a 70-30 split between the flex position guys and then your onesie positions, right? Onesie positions should really only be about 30% of your roster. And we have a couple of different examples here of that. And again, examples of how people have made their value proportions on their rosters that I want to go ahead and pull up for you here. The first one is going to be from In Pigolski. And again, this is an example of one where he actually has an elite tight end on this team in Brock Bowers. And his overall value share, again, in a 12-team league, 12%. That's about 3.5 percentage points over what we'd expect. He's in a really good spot. Production share also is almost 10%, first in his league. So we love his production and value share. However, when we're looking at his value proportion, it's pretty evenly split between wide receiver and running back, and then tight end is about 25%. What we would like to see here is a little bit more value in the wide receiver and running back position and to decrease our tight end value a little bit. Now, this probably doesn't mean, hey, you have to sell Brock Bowers. You'll notice he also has Harold Fannin on this team. Maybe this means we're going to move Harold Fannin for a wide receiver or running back. But the problem lies in this. When we're looking at this roster, who is he starting? Well, first of all, at quarterback, he's starting Bryce Young and Michael Penix. And obviously, we want to be a little bit better there, right? But then looking at his flex spots, he's starting Travis Hunter every single week. We're starting Zay Flowers, which obviously worked out this year. Marv did not work out. London was hit or miss. Judkins was hurt. He's got Scadaboo on the bench. But again, our flex spots and our quarterback spots can be a little bit better here. What I would recommend to do on this team to build the perfect Dynasty roster is I would recommend getting a little bit more productive quarterbacks, obviously more productive than Penix and Young is going to be a very low bar. Maybe allocating about 10% of our value into quarterbacks here, and then taking Fannin, maybe Ferguson, whoever. Maybe we hold Bowers on this team, or you move Bowers again for an elite running back or wide receiver, and you have that elite flex spot, and you start Fannin. That's probably my favorite one in this team, is to move Bowers straight up for either a quarterback, a running back, or a wide receiver on this team, and then you're going to start Harold Fannin. Harold Fannin was great this year. In fact, from a production standpoint, how big of a gap did you actually see between Bowers and Fannin this year? It wasn't astronomical. Everybody would prefer Bowers. He's the higher rated Dynasty tight end for a reason, but at the same time, this is a good example of one where I think the quarterback and tight end value, accounted for about, it was still about 30% here, so we did still meet that range, but the proportions here in terms of, it was very heavy tight end, not enough quarterback, and so that's kind of one of the moves that we would recommend here in terms of trying kind of getting off on our, heavy tight end and more into a diversified quarterback tight end, even though, again, it did equal about 30%. Another one was Lynn Sickey, and this was another example roster that I wanted to pull up, because when you're looking at his team, 45% of his value is in the quarterback position. It's Drake May, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young. And part of this, he has a 12.6% value share in a 10-team league, so it's about 2 percentage points over expected. But you'll notice on this team as well, 6.8% production share. We're talking about a 6 percentage point difference between value and production. This is the perfect example of a roster that's very valuable, but may not be the most productive, and that's kind of what we need to fix. He has a 15% value share in quarterback alone, meaning he has 15% of the quarterback value on his roster in a 10-team league. But again, 45% of his roster is quarterback value, and only 5.9% of his roster is running back value. He has the wide receiver value, even though it's not productive necessarily. You'll notice his 3-factor production score is lower. But again, how much is he actually doing every week starting? Kenneth Walker, Bashal Tutin, Luther Burden, and Jalen Coker. And this, by the way, from a value share perspective, from an overall value perspective, is a team we had rated as an enhanced value team. But you'll notice his 3 factors are not good. And again, all of his value is in the quarterback position. And his quarterback grades are great. But this is one where we recommended, hey, we're going to down tier from Drake May, get a better flex spot, and then we're going to get another quarterback we can start, right? This is where we're going to start moving around our value. We have about 47% of our value in wide receiver and running back. We want that to be at 70%. This is one where we allocate value. Again, more than half of our value is at quarterback and tight end here, and this team is not going to win a championship unless you actually move that value around. So again, the strategy point here, invest heavily in wide receiver and running back in Dynasty. They tend to lead to the most championships. There's a direct correlation between the running back and wide receiver value on a team and your percentage chance of winning a championship, in our opinion. And so each of these things, your value proportion, your production share, and value share, you can find them on our team blueprints. When we take a look at your team, Nathan and I do every single one of these. We give you all of these metrics, and we've got the link pinned in the comment if you want to get a team blueprint for yourself. You do get a free one with the annual Mother Flocker tier with code DOMAIN. It's going to feature your production share, value share, and a lot of your other things. The blueprint premium is what has your value proportion across your different positions, your roster makeup, and some of these other advanced analytics. Again, so you've got 2 options. You do get a free blueprint with the annual Mother Flocker tier with code DOMAIN. So if you sign up as a member, you get a blueprint, and you can then take that voucher and upgrade it to a premium if you'd like. That's the cheapest way to get all of this information. You can just get your production and value share. You can do a lot with that, again, with a free membership or as an a la carte, and you can get blueprint premiums as well. I got the link in the pinned comments if you want to get your team reviewed by Nate and I and see all of these metrics that we've had our team kind of create. Nate and we spent about 6 months coming up with all of this theory, and you would want to get it for your team. I've got the link in the pinned comment, and again, if you join, you get one free, and you get all of the different things that come with it. So again, it's flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code DOMAIN when you create an account, and again, annual Mother Flocker tier will give you that free blueprint. Let's talk about the roster makeup now in terms of the different categories of assets. We've been talking about this and how those should be distributed among your Dynasty teams.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of starts with just letting you guys know what all of those categories are. I know we've referred to a number of them in videos, prior videos. I know we just redid kind of how we do Cornerstones a couple of weeks ago. Go check that video out if you haven't already. But again, that one, we really were focusing on Cornerstone and foundational guys. And those are really kind of the top 2 tiers that we really view the premier Dynasty assets in, who are young, who are productive, who have a lot of upside, who have some of the best insulation in Dynasty. But with the Cornerstone guys, again, like the most insulated, the best of the best, right? Those are essentially the guys going in the top 2 rounds of Dynasty startups. Not all of them. There are some guys that sneak into there that we don't really view as cornerstones. Some of them are foundational, but again, that foundational tier is, again, the guys that aren't going to often be very old. They're also very insulated, great amount of production, but their ceiling hasn't necessarily been realized, but they do have a really high value floor. Then you've got kind of this tier of like mainstays and productive vets, where mainstays are kind of the younger version of a productive vet. Productive vets having like not the craziest amount of insulation due to their age, but with their great resume of high production year after year, they're always going to be in the mix, right? For the most part, with those mainstays, again, kind of similar to productive vets, their value ceiling might be capped. But, for example, like a Jameson Williams, you always know that he's going to be in like this relevant range of, a pricier flex option, but someone that you can rely on year in and year out to be at least somewhat productive, right? Zay Flowers, we would also consider in that tier as well. Upside shot, our next tier here, basically young players with high-ish insulation due to their team investment and or situation. Look, when we're looking at the journey of a dynasty asset, when it comes to like their eventual cornerstone status, you usually see them go from upside shot to foundational to cornerstone. That's kind of like the perfect development track for any given dynasty asset. Again, some people are born into the cornerstone tier like Jeremiah Love is, because as a prospect, they're just that elite and that, much of a sure thing or almost a sure thing. But that's not the case for every single prospect coming into the league, right? A lot of these guys start in the upside shot tier. And they make their way up and they kind of earn their way up into that foundational and cornerstone tier. Short-term league winners, again, are going to be, that's our smallest tier, smallest category, but it's one that matters, right? It's essentially CMC and Devontae Adams, maybe Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And like, that's pretty much about it. Guys that can single-handedly win you a championship. You saw Derrick Henry actually do that this year.
Yeah,
CMC does it pretty much every year, but we just never know when he's going to be injured or when he's going to be fully healthy.
The odd years he doesn't.
Yeah. Short-term production, again, guys that are kind of a level down from your productive vets, but they're still producing. They just have a ton of questions, whether it be injury, whether it be insulation long-term. Serviceable guys, a step up from a Jag. Like, right, we have these Jags who are basically, they're not irrelevant, but they're bench warmers. They're either developmental players who haven't yet really done anything production-wise that's relevant enough for you to ever consider starting them, but they're worth rostering because maybe they have good enough draft capital investment. Maybe they're just kind of stuck behind a really crowded wide receiver or running back room. The Jag insurance type players are guys that are, your backups. Let's say that Quinshon Judkins goes down and you have Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford, right? Those are kind of just Jag insurance guys. Blake Corum, another insurance guy behind Kyron Williams. But with the serviceable guys, those are players like, hey, a Romeo Dobbs, a Chuba Hubbard. Like, if you have to throw them into your flex spot, they can have a decent week for you. Are you going to rely on them week in and week out? Ideally not, but they are players that you can plug and play, and you can even go all the way to a championship with some serviceable type assets in your flex spots because you've suffered from so many injuries to start out the season. Then there's a replaceable tier, which are basically guys that, like, hey, the 3-factor grades are so bad they're barely rankable. If rankable at all, you basically own them on your roster and they're probably cuttable for the most part. And that's kind of just our like all-encompassing, like, hey, any remaining player that's going to be on your dynasty team, because so many leagues are so deep. There are just so many of those players that are outside really like the top 300 in ADP that are really going to have little to no chance of ever being relevant. And again, why do these categories matter? The reason that we've listed all of these categories and tried to break down every single asset in Dynasty and where they belong is because we have different types of builds, whether you're a reload, a rebuild, or a contender, go out of your way to target specific asset categories, specific players in different asset categories, and it differs based on what outlook you have. So how do we optimize your outlook? Well, for a reload, we generally have you guys targeting upside shot and foundational heavy players. We don't really want you to target guys that have cap value ceilings. We don't really want you to target guys that have risk of being replaced in the near future. As a reload, are we okay with you holding on to some productive vets, holding on to short-term league winners for now in January? Sure, but by the time that we get to August, you better get those guys off of your roster before you risk losing half of their value in the middle of the season because maybe they didn't produce. Or maybe they did. Maybe you do hold on to them for the first few weeks, but you don't know if they're ever going to be at risk of, again, missing a significant amount of time. But again, foundational and upside shot heavy guys are the ones that we really want you to go for here. Same thing kind of with rebuilds, but to a lesser degree because you don't have near as much value as a reload does, right? A reload is just kind of building up for the following year. Rebuilds are multi-year. Upside shot heavy players, upside shot guys that have the potential to maybe be foundational guys. You saw Luther Burden this year was an upside shot player. We still consider him in that tier, but he's on the higher end of that tier, and he's getting close to foundational. It's honestly debatable if he could even be in that tier, but again, that would be a significant value win if you invested in Burden at the price that he was before the 2025 season started. It was crowded in there. He was able to transcend towards the end of the season, getting more work, a very efficient type of guy. And again, we have our own take and our own opinion on what his potential upside could be long-term, But the reality is, over the last 9 months, he's been a significant value win if you invested in him as a rebuild.
Yep.
Sell any short-term production or serviceable players, consolidate into foundational players, mainstays, and upside shots. If you can take any Jags, any Jag developmental guys, any serviceable players who you know their value ceiling is capped, consolidate and get up to players that actually have some semblance of value upside, you want to be going for those players. We tell people to down tier as rebuilds and reloads, but you got to take that with a grain of salt, and you can't take it too far. You don't want to down tier to irrelevance. You want to down tier to ranges where, again, these upside shot players, these foundational players that have the potential to get up to the cornerstone status. And that's essentially what we're doing on the lower end is we're not down tiering from a serviceable player to multiple Jags. We're packaging our serviceable guys and we're getting up to a lower end upside shot, that type of concept. With contending teams, again, even this year, kind of right now in January, the best time to play the market with productive guys who are going to increase in value in August.
Yep.
This is kind of the best time to get them. Short-term league winners, productive vets, short-term production players, like go for it. We're all for it. If you're a contending team right now, you're looking to contend again in 2026 like you did the previous year, or maybe you were a future value last year and now it's time to go for it because your value share is top 3 in your league and your production share currently is bottom 3. Like this is the scenario where we would have you go target a Devontae Adams for super cheap or a Saquon Barkley for super cheap, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, those types of guys, A.J. Brown. Mainstays. And then again, if you're a contending team like an enhanced value type of team and you can go afford a cornerstone because you have so much depth and you can up tier, then we have you go for those cornerstones. I mean, we do that. I can't tell you how many times we do that on even like live streams where we see teams that are really, really solid and it's like, yo, you have too much depth that like you don't want to mess with trying to figure out who to flex every single week. Like just package those guys and get the highest upside cornerstones that you can on your roster and you'll be good to go.
Yeah. So again, to kind of put this, how should you actually optimize your roster to build the perfect dynasty roster? Typically on a great dynasty roster, we see 5 to 7 combined cornerstone and foundational players. So when I was going through some of these rosters, standard value, enhanced value, that I was like, okay, these guys are well in the mix to win a championship. I typically saw, regardless of 10 team or 12 team, any combination of 5 cornerstones and foundationals. So again, that could be 5 cornerstones. I saw a 5 cornerstone team on here. That could be 2 cornerstones and 3 foundationals. It could be 1 cornerstone and 4 foundationals. I think the more you get towards that, the more you're actually like kind of on the fence. You probably should have at least 1 or 2 cornerstones. I would say at least 2 cornerstones and at least 3 foundationals is a pretty good benchmark in order to optimize your dynasty roster. It takes work. You've got to sometimes take upside shots on guys like Luther Burden who could potentially make their way into the foundational tier, right? But 5 to 7 combined cornerstones and foundationals, typically where we see the best dynasty roster in kind of that sweet spot. You should minimize your Jags. Obviously, we talked about your Jag developmentals and then your Jag insurance, right? I mean, they're just the guys. Try to minimize those guys. Try to take upside shots. Even serviceable options when you're a contender, mainstays, things like that are much better investments to make sure you actually have your value in the right place as a dynasty team. Take advantage of the garbage for gold trades. Those Jags, packaging 3 or 4 together. Sometimes we can trick people into thinking, oh, because I'm getting 3 or 4 assets here, even though they're Jags, I can actually get something better out of this. And if you can take those guys and package them together and up tier, you're doing the right thing. And so that's kind of how to integrate that into your roster construction here. And again, we do talk about that on the Blueprint Premium, like how much you have in each category. That's kind of what we've seen. We also put the 3 factors on, and we haven't really come up with a better name for this yet. It wasn't supposed to be 3 factors. That's somebody said it was the Huffman and Schmidt 3-factor pricing model, which I was like, yeah, it's pretty much what it sounds like. But the 3 factors that we look at for your dynasty teams, we started by looking at individual player bases. We came up with our domain true ranks, which are also on the premium in the bottom right, where you can see the true rank for each player. This is, again, the 3 factors are production, insulation, and situational. We do that for every player, but we do it for your entire team. And typically, again, what we see, your production score, your insulation score, and your situational score for your entire roster directly correlates to how strong of a dynasty roster you actually have. What I've seen is for strong teams, typically you have a 7 or higher, which again, we grade these all. We have a whole algorithm that grades these. 7 or higher production, insulation, and situational each. The best teams are usually 7 or higher. Sometimes some of them flow into the 6s. So you have like a 6, 7, 8 or a 6, 7, 7, and those are totally fine as well. What we typically don't like to see is lower than a 6 at any given factor. And we don't chase the factors. I think the factors are just kind of telling us what we already know about the dynasty roster, confirming what we think about a dynasty roster. But we're not saying, oh, your insulation's so low that we're going to make trades just to get your 3-factor score up. We don't approach it that way. It's more of a byproduct of what your dynasty roster is, and not something that we're using to diagnose. But I do typically see, you should check how productive is my roster, how insulated is my roster. Obviously, insulation in Dynasty is very important. Your Dynasty team could be gone like that if you don't have the right insulation. And your situation, are you buying players on good offenses that are in good situations? That's a very important thing for production as well, and production wins money, money's cool, etc. And so that's the 3 factors, and again, that's also on the Blueprint Premium that we talk about. But typically, you want to have good production, and we talked about that earlier. Your insulation needs to be high. This is just a way of measuring your value insulation here, and then your situations. We like to invest in players with good situations as well. All right, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering now, okay, I'm a rebuild, I'm a reload, I have draft capital. What should I do with my picks? We're going to talk about it. We have draft capital strategies defined on our blueprints, and we also just apply these generally to our draft capital strategy in our videos, etc. And we have all of these different thresholds. I'll let you kind of define the thresholds for us real quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very simple. We got pretty much 4 thresholds. If you have no firsts, again, we like to look at your firsts first, and then we'll look at your seconds, thirds, and fourths. But really, the first round picks are kind of what indicate how much value you hold in any given class.
Yes.
Second round picks end up really just being a bonus, and then depending on the depth of the class and how it looks, those can end up gaining value or losing value. This year in 2026, they're going to lose value. Seconds aren't really going to carry much at all, and they're going to end up being probably serviceable at best. But again, deficient is going to be no firsts in any given class. Adequate is going to be 1 to 2 firsts. Surplus is going to be 3 to 4 firsts, and then overload is going to be 5+ firsts. You'd be surprised how many teams that I see that own like 5+ firsts in any given class, and it's like, dude, you have so much value just tied into draft capital that it's like you're going to want to start moving some of those around. But we kind of have an ideal status and ideal outlook for each type of team and where we want them to really to sit in terms of those draft capital thresholds.
Yeah, and I would say for contending teams, we want to be deficient to adequate. I'm fine with the contending team having no first. You're going for it. I don't care about the rookie class. Yeah. Sure, it's going to build your insulation score up a little bit, but I'm trying to win money, and money is cool. And if your first gets you there, I'm doing it. On almost every contending blueprint we did in season this year, we were telling them to move their first for production player. It's like that's what we're doing right now. And so contending teams, I think you're deficient having no first or 1 to 2 first. If you have more than 2 firsts as a contending team, you're doing something wrong. As a reload, you should be anywhere from 1 to 2
Unless
firsts.
you're elite value.
That's true.
then
that's
you're fine.
That's different.
Yeah.
But even then, we typically say, hey, you have a pick, take this player and make this a top 3 guy at your position. So even for elite value teams, I think you should be moving those picks a lot of times from a reload team perspective, anywhere from adequate to surplus. So anywhere from 1 to 4 firsts here, essentially. I'm fine with the reload having a lot of teams. Sometimes future values, which are technically 1-year rebuilds, have a lot of firsts. But reloads can still get away with having only their own first and just be fine. You're really just building value for the next year. Now, a rebuild, on the other hand, needs to be anywhere from surplus to overload. So anywhere from 3 to 5 firsts on a rebuilding team. And some of that, I don't know, does it, for the thresholds, when we calculate these in the blueprints, do we take into account both years, 26 and 27, or just for 1 year?
Yeah, no, so they're both broken down individually. So we have individual strategy for 2026, whether you're deficient, adequate, surplus, or overload in that specific year. We have separate analysis for 2027 right now that takes into account whether you're deficient, adequate, surplus, or overload in that year.
And I would say for rebuild, like some of you guys are going to be from adequate to overload. Some of you guys are only going to have 1 to 2 firsts as a hard rebuild, because that's what being a hard rebuild is. You don't have the assets. Yeah. And that's also totally fine. That's part of being a rebuild. Those best rebuilds or those future value rebuilds are when you get into you're rebuilding, but you are in the surplus to overload range. Those are typically our future value teams. A lot of times our hard rebuilds are unfortunately deficient or adequate. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to change from a picks perspective. Yeah. And then we have a couple, like just examples, counterproductive statuses for each outlook. Contending, it's overload. Again, you shouldn't have that many picks as a contending team. And for reload and rebuild, your counterproductive status is deficient. Don't have no picks as a rebuild, reload. But you got to be smart with your picks as well. And we do pick strategy specifically talking about that.
Yeah, and again, I want to pull back over to that team, Lensiki's team. Mm-hmm. That's an enhanced value, 12.6% value in his league, which is second in his league, and that production share is dead last. Why? When you look at that roster, the running backs are pretty rough. The depth at wide receiver is rough. The quarterback and tight end are adequate, but look at his draft capital grade of 10, where he's surplus in 2026 and 2027. An enhanced value archetype is always going to be expected for us to contend because you have the value to go. Like this is when we tell people to go with their picks. Like we let go of their picks, right? We need to move a good amount of this draft capital in 2026, turn it into guys that have high production upside opportunity with value upside opportunity as well. It's not like, hey, we want you to move all of your firsts just because, but let's take advantage of the value of that draft capital and let's spread that out across some guys that are proven players with some upside opportunity this season, with maybe some upside shots in the draft as well. But again, we don't want to put all of our stock and all of our value into draft capital as an enhanced value team, which is a contending team that we expect heading into this season. So again, just kind of a closing example there for like one of those contending teams with a borderline overload outlook with their draft capital.
So to sum it all up in a way that you can take some really concrete pieces of advice away from this video, make sure your value share does not outweigh your production share, even without getting the metrics. Make sure that you are not a super valuable team that's not productive, because it's not going to do you any good in winning a dynasty league. Make sure you're heavily invested in running back and wide receiver, and make sure that your quarterback and tight end only make up 30% at most of your value, if not less than that, when you're talking about how your value is broken out. Make sure that you're not investing in a ton of JAGs. Make sure you don't have a bunch of JAG developmental or JAG insurance guys. Focus on those guys depending on whether you're a rebuild or contend. If you're contending, of course, focus on short-term league winners, short-term production. If you're reloading, focus on upside shots, or rebuilding, focus on upside shots. Focus on even mainstays. You know, try to take some of those replaceable to JAG level guys and consolidate them and up tier depending on what your outlook is, right? Make sure you have at least 5 to 7 cornerstone and foundational pieces combined if you are expecting to contend and trying to build the perfect dynasty roster. Try to make sure that your team is both productive, insulated. Make sure you focus on your insulation as well. And you're trying to buy players on good offenses. That's fairly important. You need to balance. If you're going to buy players on the Jets in fantasy football, you need to have some players that are on really elite offenses. You need to have some Lions on your team, right? You need to have some, I can't
Rams.
There you go. Thank you. Gosh, I could not. Seahawks, you know, other good situations. And then make sure your draft capital fits which strategy you're actually going for. If you do us a favor, if you enjoy this type of strategy video, drop a like, make sure you're subscribed. I think you guys like strategy videos, but again, it's good to get feedback, so drop a like if you do enjoy it. And again, we literally can put this to the test for your team. Nate and I do all of our blueprints personally for you. We never ever would have somebody do a team review for you. It's literally what we do for a living at this point. And so if you'd like to get a team blueprint, I've got the link in the pinned comment. You've got a couple options. You can get an a la carte blueprint that comes with your production and value share and comes with some other things like your moves, your blueprint premium, which is going to come with everything we talked about on the video today. And of course, you do get that free team blueprint with the annual Motherflocker tier with code domain, but you also get infinite blueprint, a new blueprint every month. After that, you're going to get the vault, you're going to get the bakery, you're going to get our Discord, you're going to get our leagues. You can join a dynasty league and get the site, and then you can take that voucher, upgrade to a premium, and it's like legitimately a third of the cost as well. And so flockfantasy.com/owen, but I got the link pinned. You can select those options if you want us to look at your team, tell us where you grade in all of this, and then let's get a plan for your dynasty team as well, and let's all build better dynasty rosters as we get into this dynasty offseason. January typically sucks weather-wise, but a little bit better out here when we're the national champions, and it's also a great time to build dynasty teams, even as we're getting into the final four of the NFL playoffs. So we love you guys. We appreciate you. Thanks for jumping in. Go Hoosiers. We'll see you soon.